Hello and welcome to the demonstration at the end of Intro to Terraform and Ansible. I'm going to go ahead and kick this off pretty quickly and then I'll talk about what I've done. But this, just so everyone knows, this is a follow-on. It does expect that you've done the first 8 lessons, at least familiar with what's going on in them, because we're going to build upon them. There's just some extra permissions that you may not have, and you need Ansible installed and a couple other things. So I want to don't want to make that a requirement for everyone doing the workshop. I'll just do it myself here, and you guys can look at it as a worked example. So, because it's going to take a few minutes, I'm just going to go ahead and get this kicked off at the beginning. We're going to do a Terraform apply in the Demo-09 directory. I have already installed Ansible in my box. I've already installed the Ansible Galaxy roles in the collection that we already used previously on the control node. But I've installed them locally, and I've gone ahead and set up my SSH key so that, because I have multiple SSH keys, so that Terraform knows which one I'm using locally. And then, so that's all set up, but once I actually go to run the job, all I'm going to need to do is type the Terraform apply. I'm going to answer yes when it tells me what it's going to do after the plan. But that's important, that's the only command I'm going to need to give. In fact, that's the whole point here, is that I just need that one piece. Let me go ahead and hit yes. Like I said, this is going to take a few minutes. So while this is running, I can go ahead and describe some of what's happening. We'll let that run in the background. So some of the differences from what happened in the past. In the past, we stood up 2 web servers and a database behind them. We configured those with Ansible, but we had already set up the boxes with Terraform. In this case, we're going to do it all in one fell swoop. I'm also putting a load balancer in front of those 2 web servers just to make it more realistic. I don't want to get into how the load balancer gets installed. You can read through it if you want. There's a couple steps. It's opening the ports with the security groups, setting up a target group of the web server, setting up listeners to that target group, and then setting up the application load balancer itself. This is a working example of how to do it, but it's really, I got rid of a bunch of pieces that would make it more complicated and harder to read, and that includes getting rid of HTTPS and setting up certs. So it does not do that, and therefore it's really not anything but a starting point. So just keep that in mind. Another thing I did differently in this was, in the past, we were doing all our Ansible access from the control node. Here, we're actually going to do it from my laptop. Rather than opening up all the boxes to have SSH available from everywhere in the internet, I actually locked it down so that you can only get to those boxes via SSH for the Ansible purposes from my laptop. But how do I know where my laptop is? Well, I actually use a trick in here in the network TF, a different data provider here, the HTTP provider, and I'm actually hitting this URL. And if you hit this URL with these accept headers, you get back a single value. I can go ahead and pull that up and show you what happens if you don't do it with the single value. You get back a whole page of all the different information that it can find out from your IP address, but it does have my IP address in there. If you curl it with just the piece you need, you see it just returns that. So I'm using that IP address, a 70 dot address, and in some of my security groups, you can see that the CIDR block is set to be only for my current IP. So just a trick. I could have gone to any site to do it. I could stand up my own box. I could, if I have a static IP address, maybe I know what my public IP address looks like. But this way I keep it locked down. And the nice thing about this is it is completely dynamic. So if I leave where I'm recording this from and go somewhere else, like to the conference, I can go ahead and rerun it, and it will change my security groups because the values will have changed because of idempotency. It sees the change. And then I would have access from there, but not from the old address. So it always keeps it kind of as limited as possible. All right. The next thing I do that's a little bit different from what we did before is the tagging. We had the name tag before and the owner tag, which is just good practices, just so people can find them. If they're looking in the console, they know who to contact if something's going wrong with them or they're trying to figure out whether they can be deleted or not. But the big piece I want to use is this project, environment, and role. Now, I pick those names. They don't have to be those. Uh, I don't even have to have that combination of values. But in our case, that's going to be something similar to just about what everyone's going to use is I need to know the things from my project that are connected to this planet's demo. I want to know that I'm in the demo environment. So I could also maybe have a dev environment, a test environment, and a prod environment. And I want to know what role I'm going to apply that box to, or to that box. So in this case, this is the database box, right? The MongoDB. If I scroll up here, I see I have my 2 web servers, right? The count 2. So I went ahead and made that role web servers so I can find them later. Now that tagging before, while it was just a convenience, nice to have, this time I'm actually going to do something with it. And what I'm going to do with it is the inventory. In the past, what we did is we logged onto the box. We saw what 4 boxes we had stood up, the workstation, 2 web servers, and a database, and I just created an INI file by hand. Well, that won't work if we want to run these together because the boxes are being stood up right now as we speak. In fact, I can check to see. Yep, in fact, they're already stood up. Great. So while those are standing up, they just got new IP addresses. I don't know where they are. But it turns out AWS does. So by tagging these, I can use a plugin for the inventory for Ansible that can actually look that information up. And it's a simple AWS EC2 plugin. It's going to look in US East 2. That's where I'm running this from. It's going to give me the IP addresses instead of host names because that's what they have. And it's looking for everything that's tagged with project is tagged as planets. The environment is tagged as demo. And it's going to break it down into groups by role. And if I pull that back up here and I go ahead and run this command, we'll see what that looks like when I run it against that inventory file. This is just running the Ansible inventory with that inventory file and graphing the output for me. And when I run it, I can see it creates this group of all the AWS EC2 instances, these 3 boxes, 1 that was tagged database, 2 that were tagged with web servers. So that happened automatically. And if I was to delete one of the boxes with Terraform and stand up a new one in its place, the next time I run this, it would be different. Now, it's not going to create a file or anything for me. It's actually doing this on the fly. So this is good. Anytime something changes, I have a new inventory, and every time I run Terraform or Ansible, it will use that. One thing to keep in note is it is running against AWS, so it's going to pick up everything in that account, which is why I wanted to go with the project tag as well, making sure it's anything related to planets. I don't want to pick up every box in this region in AWS. All right, so once we get that, once we run that, now we've taken care of the manual step, creating the INIs. Now I can actually look at my main file. At the very end, I have this piece that is a null resource. It's a different provider. Again, something we haven't, this local exec provisioner, we haven't done that before. But this is just running my Ansible. And let me go up from the bottom. What I'm saying is, hey, after the web server and MongoDB resources are instantiated, after you apply those Terraform, I want you to always run anytime the time changes. So every time I want you to run this command. And this is a local exec. In the past, we used a remote exec to run on the box we were hitting. This time I want to run this locally. I want to run it from my laptop. And I'm just going to run the Ansible command. The Ansible command is a little bit longer than the ones we've run before, but only because I didn't use an Ansible config file. I'm actually putting all the stuff here so I don't have any dependencies. So it's going to skip the host key checking because these are brand new instances. So obviously SSH doesn't know about those keys. It's Ansible playbook. It's running the inventory that I just showed you. It's going to run with a default user of Ubuntu, which was our user on the control node, so we didn't need to specify it. Here, that's not my username, so it does need it. And I'm going to run this site.yaml playbook, and that site.yaml playbook is going to hit all the nodes. It's not going to gather any facts, which is going to speed things up a little bit because it's not going to use any. And it has one task in it, which is to wait up to 10 minutes until those targets become usable. So after Terraform stands them up, they still have to boot. They still have to go through some configuration that AWS is going to handle for them. Once I can get an SSH connection, it's literally going to use the ping command that we played with earlier. Once that ping goes through, it's going to go ahead and import the playbooks that we used before, and these are exactly the same as they were before, the Nginx playbook and the MongoDB playbook, and it's going to apply them and set them up. At the top of those, if you remember, the Nginx playbook applies to the web servers. It gathers some facts about the database so we get the connection strings, but it's going to apply to the web servers and install Nginx and PHP on them. The MongoDB playbook is going to apply to the database. It's going to install MongoDB and configure it and load some data into it. So all of that happens exactly the same as before. And let's go ahead and skip to the end and see if it's all done. Oops. Here we go. Go back over here. Yes. So that all ran. It only took 5 minutes, a little bit quicker than I thought it would. And we see that it created all of those, gave me some output, told me what the private IPs and the public IPs of the web servers are. I'm not specifically going to need them, but if I go ahead into this URL, we can see we have the same planets in the solar system demo. This time I added Pluto, even though it's not officially a planet anymore, just so that I could see that something was a little bit different than we had before. And we did that all with one single command. That was the important piece. We ran the Terraform apply. Or I could have done the plan and saved the plan and then run it so I wouldn't have to even hit yes. But that's completely, everything was dynamic. Everything happened automatically. One command and from the command line, and everything got set up. And yeah, so that's about it. There's a few shortcuts that were taken in order to get this to work. Like I said, I used HTTP, not HTTPS. There's no certs. Some other things missing. It's all documented in the page, as well as the fact that I showed you checkoff earlier by Bridge Crew. This all goes clean against checkoff, but I did suppress a lot of the, not a lot, I suppressed a number of the findings that would have told me to do things a little bit better, like use HTTPS and things like that. So if you go ahead and run checkoff, you'll see what those problems are. If you're doing it on your own, you'll get some advice on how to clean this stuff up, take it from a demo to something that's actually usable in production. All right, and thank you very much.